When you and the avoidant both stop reaching out, who does the silence betray? You might think that when no one reaches out anymore, the relationship simply fades. But what you don't realize is the moment you both go silent marks the beginning of a powerful emotional shift. Hard to believe? Imagine this. You stop texting, they stop replying, and from that empty space, the truth begins to echo without words, only through energy. You're not just walking away from someone, you're stepping out of an emotional loop you once mistook for love. While they try to keep their calm exterior, you're waking up. The silence you feared turns out to be the place where you finally meet yourself again. And here's the twist. You are the one who transforms the most. This video isn't about how to make the avoidant come back. It's a mirror to help you see why you've kept chasing that coldness, and why this silence is no longer punishment but liberation. If you've ever felt like you were too much, too patient, or too self-sacrificing in unclear relationships, this video is for you. Stay until the end, because we're not just talking about avoidance, we're talking about you and the power you're about to reclaim. Hit that follow button if you're on a healing journey, because we're just getting started on what love looks like when you no longer have to chase it. And then, one day passes, then two, then a whole week. No messages, no calls, no check-ins. You wake up, glance at your blank phone screen, and quietly tell yourself, I'm not reaching out anymore. At first, it feels like relief, like you've taken back a sliver of control after countless days of waiting for a reply. But as the silence stretches longer, something starts creeping in: uncertainty. Are they thinking about you at all? Do they remember the messages you used to send? Do they feel a hint of the emptiness that now lingers inside you? Or for them, has this silence just become a convenient escape, one that lets them move forward without emotional accountability? You pretend to be strong. You don't post anything online. You don't stalk their profile. You don't check if they're active. But deep down, you wonder, if I disappear, will they even notice? This is where the pain becomes subtle. You're no longer hurting from mistreatment. You're hurting because you've been quietly abandoned with no clear goodbye, no closure, no explanation, just space. And in that space, your mind begins creating stories. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're also waiting for you to text first. Maybe they've already let go. But the most dangerous thought is the one that turns inward. You begin to question your own worth. If I were enough, they wouldn't go silent. If I mattered, they would have reached out. Maybe I really am too much. See it now? The silence isn't just absence. It becomes an internal conversation, one between the part of you that wants to let go and the part of you that's still holding on. The irony? They might be going through something similar, but because they carry an avoidant attachment style, they cope by pulling away. They won't admit they miss you, even if they're rereading your old texts. They won't show they care, even if the emptiness is starting to crack their calm facade. But the biggest difference is, they've learned how to hide from their emotions. You've learned how to feel them too deeply. They don't reach out, neither do you. But that doesn't mean you've both moved on. In fact, it's the beginning of a silent emotional game, one that no one talks about, but everyone who's been there knows. You count the days. You flinch at every notification. A song comes on and your heart aches, but you stay quiet, because you don't want to be the one always trying. And the real question echoing inside isn't, do they miss me? But, why do I need them to? And that is the question that starts to wake you up. And then you begin to wonder, how can they stay silent for this long? Why haven't they reached out? Did none of it matter to them? But this is where you need to pause and look deeper, because an avoidant silence was never really about you. It's always been about them. You think they're avoiding you. But in truth, they're avoiding the parts of themselves they can't bear to face their fear of being hurt, of losing control, of being emotionally dependent. They didn't walk away because you weren't enough. They walked away because they never learned how to stay when things get emotionally real. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotions felt dangerous, where love was conditional, where needing others was seen as weakness. They learned early that silence was safer than vulnerability. Every time they expressed emotion, it was met with rejection, judgment, or neglect. So over time, they built walls not to manipulate, but to survive. When you came close with warmth, patience, love, you did nothing wrong. But to them, that intimacy awakened an old fear. They didn't know what to do with someone who could see them clearly. So instead of leaning in, they pulled away. Because distance feels safer than connection. And you, with your open heart, interpreted that withdrawal as rejection. The cruelest part? You believed that if you were better, they would finally let you in, so you began to fix yourself. You became softer, more forgiving, less demanding, trying to hold the relationship together. But in reality, you weren't holding them. You were slowly abandoning yourself. This is the cycle. They pull away to feel safe. You move closer to feel seen. They retreat again. You blame yourself. Every time they disappear, you step forward. Every time you hurt, you convince yourself, maybe I just need to understand them more. But this is no longer love. It's a wounded pattern between two insecure attachment styles. You're not wrong for loving them, but you are mistaken for thinking your love can heal them while you're slowly falling apart. Because real love never requires you to shrink just to fit inside someone else's safety zone. Avoidants aren't emotionless. They have storms inside they've never dared to touch. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're terrified that feeling will cost them control. And you, with all your emotional depth, accidentally became the mirror reflecting what they fear most. Real connection. So they disappear, without words, without closure. Because if they had to explain, they'd have to confront themselves. And even worse, you try to understand. You wait, you forgive, you hope they'll be ready one day. But you don't see that. You don't have to earn your worth. If someone only feels comfortable when you have no needs, they're not in a relationship, they're in control. It's time to face the truth. Avoidance isn't random silence. It's a survival strategy. But you are not responsible for healing it. Your job is to return to yourself and ask the real question. Why do I believe that love must be earned from those who always run from it? And then one day, you stop checking your phone not because you forgot about them, but because you've stopped trying to remind yourself they'll come back. You start doing the little things again. Cooking for yourself, cleaning up your space, listening to old music, sitting in silence without needing someone on the other end. Not to prove you're okay, but because, for the first time in a long while, you're returning to yourself. This is the turning point, the place where the invisible game between you and the avoidant loses its fuel. Because you're no longer the one feeding it. You're no longer sending messages just to check in. You're no longer posting cryptic statuses hoping they'll notice. You're no longer bending yourself to keep a one-sided connection alive. And right in that moment, the power dynamic begins to shift. The avoidant, the one who used to rest easy knowing you'd always hold the thread, suddenly senses something missing. No more check-ins, no more emotional cues, no more validation that they're still wanted without having to show up fully. For the first time, they no longer hold control. They can't predict your next move. They don't know what you're feeling or thinking. And that unknown unsettles them, not because they suddenly love you more, but because they no longer control the emotional atmosphere. Meanwhile, you, the one who once lived in reaction to their behavior, are slowly pulling back your emotional investment. And something beautiful happens. The silence that once wounded you becomes the space where you start to breathe again. You begin to hear your inner voice more clearly. I'm tired. I deserve clarity. I don't want to stay in a relationship where only one person is trying. Clarity doesn't come from their response. It comes from your absence in the very dynamic they once dominated. They may still be silent. They may still look fine. But what you can't see is the quiet chaos building inside them. There's no longer someone to blame. No longer someone to call when they feel lonely. No longer someone to reassure them they're still desired. You're not there anymore. And that's the earthquake. No one expects the one who once chased to become the one who walks away. But you don't need to be strong in the way they imagine. You only need to be home within yourself. In that silence, you're no longer the one waiting. You're the one choosing. You're no longer trying to win. You don't need to win them. You just need not to lose yourself. And for the first time, you realize, when you stop chasing, you don't lose them, you find yourself again. And that is the real transformation. And then, in the silence you once feared the most, something gentle begins to happen. Not their return, not the apology you waited for, but your inner voice, the one you abandoned long ago, begins to speak. At first, it's faint, a whisper behind your thoughts. You barely notice it. You just feel that today, the silence hurts a little less than last week. Not because you're numb, but because you're starting to wake up. You realize that for so long, your life revolved around trying to interpret someone else's emotions. You waited outside the closed door of their heart, hoping one day they'd let you in, but the moment you stopped knocking, you discovered something profound. The home you needed to return to was never theirs. It was yours. You start sitting with the silence instead of running from it. It no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like space, a sacred boundary where you learn to stand alone without collapsing. You realize you didn't die because they stopped texting. You're still breathing. And somehow, you're becoming calmer. This is how healing begins. You rediscover the small things you forgot, the book you meant to finish, the way rain sounds when you're actually listening, the walk you abandoned because you were too busy waiting on someone emotionally absent. You see yourself like a flower beaten by months of wind, tired, bent, fragile but slowly lifting itself again. Not because someone rescues you, but because you begin rescuing yourself. And when you do, something remarkable happens. You reclaim the power you once handed to them. You finally understand what you once only heard but never embodied. Silence is not punishment, it's clarity. When you were entangled with an avoidant, you lived in reaction to their moods. They pulled away, you panicked. They distanced, you moved closer. They shut down, you tried harder to open them up. But now, separated from that loop, you see a truth you weren't ready to accept. You've lost yourself for so long you forgot who you were. As the days pass, you start asking questions you never let yourself face. Why did I feel the need to prove my worth to someone who didn't see it? Why was I so afraid of being abandoned that I accepted emotional scraps? Why did I mistake endurance for love? And slowly, a deep truth emerges. It wasn't the avoidant who broke you. It was you staying where your soul kept whispering, leave. You weren't weak. You were uninformed. No one taught you how to love without losing yourself. And silence once your enemy becomes the teacher you didn't know you needed. You observe your emotions like a parent watching a frightened child within. Oh, I panic because I fear abandonment. I bend over backwards because I fear being invisible. I cling because I never learned to stand alone in peace. And then you exhale, a deep, long, releasing breath. Not a release from them. A release from the version of you that believed you were not enough. Well, in the quiet, you discover you're not lonely. You're simply reacquainting yourself with who you are, the person you neglected while overperforming for someone else. Your body feels lighter. Your mind becomes quieter. You sleep better. You smile more genuinely. And most importantly, you don't need to perform peace for anyone. You are at peace. And then a soft realization emerges. Your rebirth didn't begin when they left. It began when you stayed. Stayed with yourself. Stayed with the silence. Stayed with the discomfort instead of escaping it. And from that stillness rises a new kind of strength. Not the kind that declares, I don't need anyone. Not the prideful, hardened kind, but the quiet strength of someone who finally understands. Inner peace is not earned through someone else's presence. It is protected through your own. And that strength once found will stay with you forever. You begin to realize something your wounded heart couldn't accept before. Avoidants are not emotionless. They are people who feel deeply but never learned how to feel safely. They look fine. They go to work. They interact. They post on social media. They might laugh, share stories, even act as if your relationship never meant much. But that's just the shell they've built over a lifetime, a survival shell. Avoidants are often people who were hurt and never taught how to heal. They learned to avoid emotions because whenever they opened up, they were met with invasion, judgment, or abandonment. To them, distance equals safety, closeness equals danger. So they pull back. Not because they don't care, but because, deep down, there's a child inside who was once taught. Feelings get you hurt. You can only rely on yourself. When you go silent, truly silent, without chasing, without checking in, without trying to fix the connection, you disrupt their entire emotional system. They didn't expect you to stop, because in their subconscious, you were the constant. You were always the one who'd reach out, repair, reconnect. But when you vanish not in bitterness, not as punishment, but in healing, your absence becomes a mirror too bright to ignore. It forces them to face the very fear they've built their life avoiding, being left behind. What hides beneath their I'm fine facade isn't indifference. It's a quiet storm of unanswered questions. Why haven't they messaged? Did they forget me? Are they seeing someone else? Or worse, Did they finally realize I'm not enough? They won't say these things out loud. They won't text you at 2 a.m. They won't post sad quotes. Because they've been trained to believe showing emotion is weakness. That vulnerability is dangerous. But understand this. Their fear isn't smaller than yours, it's just better hidden. This silence isn't your game. It's their internal earthquake. For the first time, they can't predict your move. They don't know if you'll come back. They don't know if they still have you. And to the avoidant, that's not just loss, it's a collapse of the emotional control system they've relied on to survive. They might drown themselves in work, flirt with someone new, act like nothing happened. But when the night comes, when there's nothing left to distract them, they begin to feel the same emptiness you once carried for them. Now there's no one to blame, no one to wait for, no one taking responsibility for the connection. And the truth begins to echo. I pushed them away. I destroyed what could have been real. You don't have to rejoice in that. But you don't have to feel guilty either. Because now you know, you didn't leave to punish them. You left to stop punishing yourself. Whether they face that truth or not, that's their path to walk if they ever choose to. Their emotions are real. Their storm is real. But you no longer have to weather it. You've chosen to walk back into your own Sunday. And then, on an ordinary morning, you look in the mirror and realize, I'm no longer the person who begged for love. You still think of them sometimes. There are still soft moments. But what's growing inside you now isn't the ache to be loved, it's the awakening of self-worth. Something that had been neglected for so long because you were too busy waiting to be chosen. You used to believe that being chosen validated your worth, that if someone needed you, kept you, loved you back then, and only then did you have permission to feel valuable. But silence, the thing you once feared, has become the mirror reflecting how untrue that belief was. No one came to save you. No apology arrived. No one whispered, you mattered. But somehow, you became the one who began saving yourself. You start seeing your past behaviors differently. The way you overgave just to avoid being left. The way you lowered your standards just to keep someone close. The way you silenced your needs to avoid being too much. And you realize you gave away too much emotional power. You let someone else's behavior dictate your joy, your self-trust, your identity. Their silence used to break you. Now, it's rebuilding you. Day by day, parts of you return. The sensitivity once called weakness becomes your intuition. The loyalty once taken for granted becomes kindness with boundaries. The patience once exploited becomes discernment, knowing when to stop giving. You no longer chase love. You walk toward yourself, and something magical happens. Your emotional frequency begins to shift. You stop broadcasting from a place of lack. You stop acting out of scarcity. You walk like someone who knows, I'm worthy even if no one says it. I'm whole even if no one stays. I choose myself, and that's enough. It's not that you don't want love anymore. It's that you no longer want the kind of love that costs you your sense of self. You no longer need someone's approval to trust your worth. You revoke the permission you gave others to decide how you feel about yourself. Sure, some days still hurt. Some nights still ache. The silence still stings at times. But you are different now, because now you know, feelings can't destroy you, only abandoning yourself can. You used to hope they'd return. Now, if they do, they'll find someone entirely new. Someone who no longer needs to be chosen. Because now you've chosen yourself. Strangely enough, when you stop holding on, everything becomes lighter. Not because you've forgotten them, but because you no longer need them to feel whole. You still remember, but the memory doesn't drag you back anymore. It passes like a breeze touching you, then moving on. You don't react urgently to emotion. You've learned to sit with it, breathe through it, and let it go. Then you realize, peace doesn't come from someone else's presence. It comes from your full presence with yourself. You no longer wait for them to change so you can feel better. You no longer think, if only they understood me, things would be okay. You don't even need closure to move forward anymore. Because you've reached something deeper, acceptance. You accept that some people only come into your life to teach you, that not everyone you love can love you back in a healthy way. And most of all, you accept that love doesn't need to hurt to be real. From the outside, you still look the same, working, socializing, smiling. But your internal energy has changed. You no longer emit the frequency of, I'm waiting. You are no longer paused in an unfinished story. And at that very moment, your silence begins to speak to them. No more texts from you. No more check-ins. No more rescuing them from their own emotional withdrawals. Your absence isn't emptiness, it's a mirror. For the first time, they're left alone with themselves, with no one to decode them, no one to absorb their coldness, no one to prove they're still worthy without effort. They begin to feel your absence, but by now, the person they miss isn't the one who used to wait. Because you've changed. You're no longer the one who stayed up waiting for a reply. No longer the one who doubted yourself every time they pulled away. No longer the one who silenced your own needs just to keep them near. Now, you walk with quiet steadiness, not to teach them a lesson, but because you no longer want to return to the loop you healed from. And this is what unsettles them most. Not your silence, but the silence that no longer carries hope. It's not, "I'm waiting for you." It's, "I'm living now." And maybe for the first time they feel the real loss. Not because you punished them, but because they never imagined you could leave without needing them to follow. You feel a hint of sadness that's real, but sadness doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means you honor what was, even if it couldn't last. You don't need to close your heart. You simply don't open it for those who don't honor its light. And you know what? That is quiet, powerful transformation. And then you realize the thing you once feared most has now become your safest place. Silence. It's no longer the sting that greets you every morning. No longer the invisible scream when your phone stays quiet. No longer a sign for you to decode, wait for, or desperately hope over. Now, silence has shifted. It is no longer lack, but completion. No longer being left behind, but coming home. You no longer need closure from them, because now you understand, you are the closure. No apology needed. No explanations. No tidy ending to give yourself permission to move on. Because the ending was never about the story with them. It was about the old version of you who needed to be chosen to feel worthy. And that long, aching silence, it did something no one else could. It helped you bury that version of you, the one who gave too much just to be enough. You used to confuse love with chasing. You used to think enduring pain made it deeper. But now you know. Real love doesn't ask you to break yourself to be seen. It sees you even when you're still. And so the transformation happened quietly. No dramatic goodbyes. No revenge or proving anything. Just this. You stood up, slowly, and moved forward, no longer looking back the way you used to. You're not better than them, but you're better than who you used to be. And that's why you feel free. Silence, in the end, wasn't the death of love. It was the death of the old you, the one who needed to be chosen, understood, saved. And when that version faded into the quiet, something else was born. You, the one who chooses yourself. Now, even if they return, you don't tremble. You don't need their answers. You no longer crave to be picked. Because now, you know, you make the final decision. You determine your value, not the one who failed to see it. This is quiet maturity. This is power without noise. And you carry it in your breath, your steps, your presence. You no longer fear silence. Because you now understand that. In that silence, you found the most precious thing, yourself. And no return, no reunion, no text is worth trading that for.